So I am the final speaker for the evening, and I'm going to be talking about petroglyphs and stone tools here in the KEWEENAW. Go ahead. I'm Bob Wheeler. First of all, most of us probably know, but I'll say it anyways, petroglyphs are images created by removing parts of the rock's surface by incising, pecking, carving, or abrading as a form of rock art. And the word comes from the Greek, from petro, meaning stone, and glyphin, I don't know if I was pronouncing that right, meaning to carve. So it's just a mark on a rock made by human beings. Go ahead. First, I'm going to start with just some petroglyphs. If you look online, you can find petroglyph pictures till they're out, the yin-yang. But further away, these are similar to some that I'll show you that are close by. This is Mexico. Go ahead. This is Nevada, again with the geometric forms and lines and grooves. Go ahead. This is reported to be the oldest one in North America. I just heard this recently. I don't know if it's really true. I don't know how they know it's the oldest one, but reported at 14,000 years or so, but the similar grooves and geometric forms. Go ahead. This is in Vermont, elliptical grooves, similar to some I'll show you in a little bit. Also in Vermont, this is a Blanchard stone. It's about 10 feet long or so with the similar grooves. Go ahead. Closer here is the Jeffers petroglyph site. This is a thunderbird, kind of iconic petroglyph. Go ahead. Also at the Jeffers, there's thousands of them there in the Jeffers. I don't know if you've been there. A big area, acres and thousands of them. This is more of them. Go ahead. And they're still discovering more of them all the time. This is some that they pulled the dirt back. Robin was here, photographed this 2 years ago, I think. Pulled the dirt back, and there's more grooves and stuff under the soil that's just waiting, and I'm sure there's more and more and more. Go ahead. Also in the area, the Peterborough, Ontario, the fire went through and uncovered the duff off a rock, and all of a sudden there's all these petroglyphs. Somewhat controversial. There's some real claims that what that might mean, but interesting stuff anyways. Go ahead. Closer here, the Hensler site, this was mentioned earlier. One of the oldest ones known, a spiral, a real nice, I think you can see that. But just a real nice form on it. I don't know how big that is exactly, but pretty. Go ahead. Also in Wisconsin, the Running Deer site, clearly a deer, but straighter lines. Most of them aren't straight lines like this. The Native Americans, they're more of a curves and stuff. Go ahead. Also in the Running Deer site, this is a man. This is the shape of it here, but without the head, and the smaller one with the head. Somewhat unusual, but I'll show you one similar to that close by here. Yep. Here in Michigan, Sanilac, down in Lower Peninsula. This is in sandstone. It's kind of crumbly. They put a roof over it, and there's some controversy whether the roof really belongs there. But this is open to the public again, at least through the summer, certain hours. I haven't been there. I'd like to go. Go ahead. Also in Sanilac, the Archer, kind of the iconic petroglyph for Sanilac. Go ahead. Here on the shores of KEWEENAW Bay, this is, I don't know how old this is, probably fairly modern. I think it's initials, GHV. I don't know who that is, but somebody carved rock. So we don't know how old any of these are. Well, I guess some people say they know how old some are, but mostly rock is very hard to date. This is probably pretty modern. We don't know. Go ahead. So getting close to home here, up near Copper Harbor is the ship. We have a reproduction of it right here. That's the real size of it. Controversial. Most archaeologists will say it's modern, done by somebody doing graffiti or drunk college kids or whatever the story may be. But to me, it's artwork. It's hard basalt rock. Somebody was an artist that did it. They knew what they were doing. Little or no oopsies. They didn't make mistakes. It's not quite a continuous line, but nearly one continuous line. Somebody that knew how to carve rock did that. It wasn't just on a whim. Go ahead. And right nearby there is the bear. We have that on the silent auction out there, another reproduction like this. I can tell you about those reproductions, but again, this is artwork. This is really pretty. This is it's small, it's not very big. but kind of iconic. There's mounds that are very similar in shape to this, but the unusual stylistic method of making it is unique. Well, not unique, but unusual. Go ahead. Also right nearby there, this is a outcrop, a basalt outcrop. And over here, this is probably from 2009. The raven-headed man, this is similar to that man that we saw on the running deer site, except he's got a raven head on him. Jack Steinbring, who's a well-known archaeologist, rock art specialist, looked at this and thought that the raven was separate from the man. It doesn't really quite connect, and it looks different. It's darker, a little bit heavier. He thought it was somebody else. Somebody made that. It was two different people that made it. It wasn't the same guy that made that as that, same person. But fairly recently, that was defaced. Somebody came and specifically went after that raven and scratched it out. Didn't bother the man or the circle cross that's right beside there. And there's also a hand just off this picture, real close. We'll see a similar one in a minute. So why did they do that specific part of it? Why did they wreck that? Maybe because they had made that some years before and went back, and now it's getting well known, and they went back and scratched out what they did before. I don't know. There's some other theories too, but people are going in there and defacing it and doing damage. Go ahead. Here's some more damage that somebody did. Just, I don't know why they would do that, just idly scratching the rock just to see what happens with it, I guess, see how hard it is. And of course, it's the lichen and stuff that turn it gray in different colors, and right below it's pink. The surface, the bare surface of it is fairly friable. You can kind of rub off a little bit, but just below the surface, it gets really hard. It's hard basalt. Go ahead. So our first attempt to protect that was, well, I contacted the landowner, and he was very supportive of trying to protect the site when the raven-headed man got defaced. We went, and this is the ship. This is Ed Lottie and Mike Lynch, who is a member of the CCSC, and he's passed away now. And we placed this steel and plexiglass cover over it. We bolted it into the rock. We drilled a hole in the rock and bolted it in there and concreted it. And kind of got some flack from the archaeologist and the local tribe that you're not really supposed to do that. It's not archaeologically acceptable because you change the chemistry, you change the environment of the rock. And how might that influence some testing that we may do someday in the future? And my understanding is Native Americans think of it that rock is natural and it wants to breathe and it wants to be exposed to the air, and it doesn't make it happy to be covered up like that. And that people defacing it is part of the nature, is part of the natural cycle. Things change, things are destroyed. Nothing's permanent, and things are destroyed in time. And that's just a natural cycle, and that's the way it should be. So we removed the cover, trying to be responsible archaeological community. So we've removed it, and it hasn't been damaged since then. And it's at the mercy of the next person that goes and visits, and hopefully people will be respectful of it. Go ahead. This is another petroglyph nearby, also near Copper Harbor. This is an arrow. This was discovered in 2012. This is the point of the arrow, the shaft of it, and the feathers back here. Lots of little lines off there that some people see a lot of meaning in those, but I'm not sure. There's other marks nearby. This isn't far from Fort Wilkins, of course, and some of them I think are from the 1800s. Maybe it was the soldiers up there out for a good time and marking the rock, but there's several other marks nearby, some apparently animal effigies nearby. I don't know if effigy is the right word for a petroglyph, but animal figures that are well worn. There's a lot others, especially back at the ship site, that are worn to, you can barely see them. But clearly there was a lot more going on there at some point. Go ahead. Now, what really complicated that is that in 2014 in Council Bluffs, Iowa, they found a bear, and it's almost the same size, and it's almost exactly the same shape, same style, same thickness, same width. It's the same. There was some connection. Either the same person made both of them, or a person saw one and remembered it and went back and made the other one. But there's some connection, surely. So I found the archaeologists that had reported this and sent them pictures from Copper Harbor. And then, okay, because the Copper Harbor ones are suspect, this one is suspect. And they stopped talking to me, and that was the end of that. So it's opinions. These people are way more learned than I am. They know stuff, they've seen stuff. They know more than I do about it, but it's opinions. We need scientific data. We need investigation on it. We can't just say, well, it's got to be fake. We got to know. We need more than opinion on it. Go ahead. This is Iowa again. This is the bear. That's the man, almost identical to the man in Copper Harbor. And this is the hand. I know I didn't show you the hand in Copper Harbor, but it's the same thing. A little bit different on the wrist area, but the same style, just single lines for fingers and the thumbs. It's almost identical. So there's some connection between the petroglyphs in Copper Harbor and in Iowa. Long ways away? I don't know. Interesting thing though. There's more to be discovered. So maybe the ship was done by somebody recently and he just copied the same thing as the bear. I don't know. We don't know. But to discard it because it doesn't fit with what everybody thinks it should be, I don't think that's right. I don't think we can do that. Go ahead. And there's the two bears side by side. I don't know how you could not know that there's some connection there. Go ahead. Closer here, not far from where we stand, this is the Upper Planting River site. I should have a scale on here. I don't. This is the exact duplicate of it. Reproduction. If the light is just right, you can see it clearly. If the light is not right, you can't see it at all. That's the thing about petroglyphs. They change. They change with the light. I call them rays, the three, because they seem to radiate from the same spot up here. There's nothing there, but they just seem to all connect right there. This line is north-south, solidly true north-south. This line points right to a rock cairn. It's up about 100 feet away on the same site. And significantly, I think it curls over. This is a pretty flat face. This is Jacobsville sandstone. It's bedrock. I believe it's bedrock. This is kind of raised, so there's soil around it, but it's a large outcropping right there. And there's quite a bit of topography in the bedrock, though. And I think this is bedrock. We'll excavate it at some point and find out. But this line comes here, and then it dives over, and it goes down into the soil there. Go ahead. Whoops. Missed it. This is the same petroglyph with a little bit of snow. I know we don't want to see that right now, but it's coming. Again, the same thing. It just shows up better without the light. Go ahead. Also, right nearby, the rock cairn I mentioned, within 100 feet of the first one I called the 5 line, are a number of boulders in the rock cairn. It's a tumble-down rock cairn, and they have grooves in them. This is the groove, and in the central part of what was the cairn, what would have been below all the other boulders, I believe, are 5 or 6 of these that are very similar in size. They're about 6 inches long. They vary a little bit in width and depth, but very consistent in length. And they're not all, some of them would be like on a corner of a rock where it could be utilitarian, where you're sharpening something in there. But they're clearly man-made. They're not natural. But some of them are on the face of a rock where you just couldn't get in there to sharpen. So they're not to me, they're clearly not utilitarian. They're symbolic, and they mean something. I don't know what they mean, but they mean something. Go ahead, Robin. This is the rock cairn. It's tumbled down. This is kind of an arc of stone here, but this would have been the main part of it. And there's about 5 or 6 of those grooves right in this area. There's a couple others that are bigger, that are a little further away, but they're all right in that area, which would have been, I think these are tumbled down from on top of here. You know, they've tumbled down over the years, the trees grow up through and they freeze and thaw. But they would have been underneath. I don't know what this all means. I don't know what the cairn is, but it's fun stuff. Go ahead.
How did you happen upon it?
Well, I've known about it for a long time. That 5 line was exposed, and then I really started looking around, and it's just right there, right where everybody can see it. This is I call it the T. This is also bedrock, and it's just 6 or 8 feet from the 5 line, but very different construction. Probably metal scratched out. If it's really old, probably copper. If it's more modern, it might be steel. Go ahead. This is another, right nearby. This is the bedrock, exposed bedrock, quite a long length of it. And this is pecking, well, I'll start over here. This is a linear groove, long and fairly parallel sides. There's another one right over here. You'll see it in a minute. And then this is pecking, where they were just hitting it. And I think they were going to make another elliptical groove. I'm making this up, kind of. I think they were in the process of making an elliptical groove there and stopped for some reason, but maybe they had something else in mind. It's awful hard for me or us to understand what the meaning was. You know, a totally different culture, totally different time, totally different people, and to say, well, this is what they meant, it's a real stretch, at least for me. Go ahead. So this is that same, that last picture we just saw. We saw this groove really evidently. This is the smaller groove that we couldn't really see. This is that pecking. And this is a bedrock, keeps going. We did a small excavation there last fall, and you can see the pink down here was below the surface of the ground, and above is kind of grayish. It turns gray from the lichen real quick. There's also a groove here that you can't see well because of the light that changes just with sitting and watching it. As the sun moves, it'll change. It looks different, but very similar to these grooves. A lot of little dimples and peck marks in here. This down here is a deep hole. It's a couple inches deep right here. Goes in, not much bigger than your thumb, but that might be natural. There are pebbles in the sandstone, and sometimes those pebbles pop out and they make a hole. So it's hard to tell that they're all man-made, but clearly some of them are. This is an elliptical groove, almost exactly the same size as the ones on the rock cairn in the back. That was always exposed. I always liked it, but this was the soil level. And as we dug down, well, there's another little groove here that's weathered quite a bit. And then this right here, you can't see it well. Here it's a hole. It's a cupule, about 3 inches across, about 2 inches deep. And it's on the side. There are reports of cupules that are on the flat where they were putting nuts in there and breaking them open, and so they wouldn't lose all the meat of the nut. But this is on the side. This is about the angle it's at. This is the same petroglyph right there, the reproduction of it. We call that the exclamation point because it looks like an exclamation point. Go ahead. This is the exclamation point again with a size on it. Again, you can see the hole a little bit better. It's all pecked out. Clearly it's man-made. Go ahead. And then right beside that we found this. It's a Quartz Jasper debitage. The back side of it, what you can see right here, is basalt. Bill Rose told me earlier, I had him look at it, most likely formed in the void in the basalt. And the center of it would have been a nice material for flake stone tools. And they most likely chipped it away and got the stone tools that they could get out of the middle. And this was out on the outside edge, so it's no longer useful for a blade, for a stone, for a tool, but it's just too darn pretty to throw away. Go ahead. So they put it right there. I don't know if they made that cupule for it. Actually, Robin picked it up. This is a rock that is cleaved away from here, and it's 3 inches or so gap right here, and it was right down inside there. So about 1.5 feet away, about over a foot deep. This is all glacial till away from there, but right up next to the rock, it's just a really clean, sandy loam. The sandstone is very durable and very sturdy, but it sheds off sand over the years, and leaves collect every year in branches and acorns, and they rot, and it's just a clean, sandy loam was right up against the rock there. Now, we do this, and it doesn't mean much. I can tell you about it, and it's interesting, and it's fun, but I want to get a professional archaeologist to do it, and then it means a lot more. Exclamation point. Again, this is the back side of it, showing the basalt, the outside of that nodule, and there it is. Does anybody know of any similar petroglyph rock art type things? Nobody I've talked to has. I'd like to know more, but go ahead. That was petroglyphs. Any questions on petroglyphs or comments? Moving along, stone tools. This one I got to read. So, ground stone tools. I'm going to start, go ahead. Next slide I'm going to end with. I believe I've recovered a number of stone tools that should be classified as hand stones due to the similarity described in the text which is going to follow. Common characteristics of these northern hand stones are that they are beach cobbles of dense, durable, tough, heavy stone, often at least one tabletop flat side. They often have grooves or striations on the flat side at a similar orientation. There's battering evident on one blunt end, and often the blunt end has a similar shallow angle to the perpendicular. I'll show you that more in a little bit. They often are tapered or pointed at one end, and sometimes they have a very sharp end opposite of that battered end. And they often have chip marks where material was removed from them. Go ahead. This presentation is based on the text Archaeological Laboratory Methods, and particularly in Chapter 1, the analysis of ground stone milling and processing implements, decorative and ritual objects, cutting and abrading tools by Dr. Joan Schneider. And I do want to thank Dr. Scott DeMel of NMU who shared this information with me. Go ahead. First of all, stone tools. Stone tools are separated into two basic categories: flake stone tools and ground stone tools. This is somewhat problematic for a number of reasons. Number one, they're grouped in how they were made and not in how they were used. Two, they were both stone tool types used both processes of flaking and grinding in their manufacture. Also, some stone implements are placed in the ground stone tools, but they're not really a great fit for that. And some ground stone tools attain their final shape through use and not in their manufacture, where flake stone tools are almost always manufactured in their final stage. Well, we might find them broken or something, but in their final use. And some ground stone tools are manufactured in their final shape, but a lot are not. Go ahead. So, regardless of those difficulties, some ground tools groundstone tools were used with little or no modification, and other groundstone tools were initially shaped by flaking off unwanted material, like this. In these less formalized tools, we often see evidence of negative flake scars where rock was broken off. Other more formalized tools began with flaking, and then pecking, and continued shaping, and finally grinding to a finished manufactured shape, similar to this. This is a celt. Formalized groundstone tools include axes, celts, hoes, pipes, blades, shaft straighteners, and effigy figures. Groundstone tools including milling stones, hand stones, pestles, mortars, and abrading tools assume their final form through use in grinding, pulverizing, crushing, smoothing, and scraping various substances. Most tools, even today, are used for a variety of tasks, and this is especially true for groundstone tools, and they are often multi-purpose tools. Go ahead. Of course, this is the hammerstone, and we've talked about that quite a bit, or a number of times today, and it was made by pecking and grinding, so it is a groundstone tool, but not a great fit. It's not like the classical groundstone tool. But it's the iconic one for this area especially, and is found by the thousands at mining sites, and I won't go into that anymore. Go ahead. So, identifying groundstone surfaces. First, this is a figure out of the book. First of all, of course, is just naturalized, unweathered, jagged edges. This is exaggerated, of course. And a weathered surface where it's just all smooth. And then groundstone here. Rock on rock makes peaks of both surfaces become smoother. Valleys remain rough. Groundstone tools used to process wood, leather, dried meat, or plant fibers show less wear and can be difficult to distinguish from naturally occurring weathering. Okay? So this is a real close-up of one. I hope we'll be able to see that here. Here, this is a striation, a valley, and you can see little extra grains here, and it's really rough in here. And I could see it better without the picture, but that's the best I got. And then right beside it, this is that same valley that's right there. And then this is very smooth, all similar. And this was looked at and verified by, again, Dr. Scott DeMel from NMU, that these are stone tools. One concern is glacial striations, which often are found on bedrock. That's, by definition, they're on bedrock rather than on smaller stones. So I believe that bedrock is much more apt to have striations because it's a big area rather than a smaller stone that's more going to tumble when it's getting pushed by the ice. And also these striations are also found in conjunction with a number of other tool characteristics. So I think the likelihood of them being glacial striations is smaller. Go ahead. So these are a couple of handstones from the Upper Planting River site again, found nearby the 5 line, well, within 100 feet of the 5 line. Handstones used for hammering and crushing show signs of battering on one or both ends. You can't see them well here, but I'll show them to you afterwards. This is very blunted. It's not a fracture where it's all broken off, but there's several different faces on there, and here too. And again, the striations here and here, a number not exactly the same, but there's very similar angles. And the orientation is along the length of the tool, not very often across, but along the length, as if they were going along with them. Those used for grinding and polishing will show smooth sides and faces, sometimes with striations, right there. Go ahead. Again, this is a very flat face here. It's hard to see there. Very flat right here. And chip marks. This is the same picture we saw earlier. This is another one found within 75 feet of the 5 line. Where was I? Go ahead. And finer work would require a sharper edges, narrowing surfaces, or a sharper point. Where this narrows right, this is a blunted end, very clearly, and again, not just one face, but a number of different faces to it, and it narrows right down on this end. Some of these, I'll find them like this, and they're broken, and that may be when they stop using them, but this one is not broken, and it comes to a nice point. Go ahead. Again, the real pointy ones. This is just clearly a point, and this one too. Again, the blunted end at a little angle, striations in there, flat side. This was these are both, of course, the same, just flipped over. This is a Gab Roll, and it doesn't fracture to make a flat side like a lot of them do, so it's tougher, and it doesn't have a flat side. I have 2 of them out of Gab Roll, and they don't have the flat sides. Go ahead. This is another one I found near Delaware Mine, a battered end. Both ends are battered. One is broken even, that's why it got tossed, I think. And rough sides. This is very smooth on these faces, but both sides are very roughed up. And I think they weren't holding them, gripping them, and pounding on them. Well, these are rocks that I'm showing you right here. They weren't, really gripping them and pounding on them. They were just holding them enough to control them and bouncing them. And then you can do that all day. If you grip it like that and start pounding, you're going to be torn up really quick. Where am I? Other characteristics of groundstone tools, differing surface smoothness on different areas of the stone. If it has a consistent smoothness, it means it's likely not a groundstone tool. Distinct transitions in smoothness, especially at an edge or a shoulder. Go ahead. Well, it's really hard to see. This is a shoulder right here, a real sharp edge. Again, this is really highly magnified. And it's out of focus here because it's not too far away, and out of focus here. But there's striations here and here that are pretty fine and not too easy to see there. Another characteristic is edges having longitudinal striations. That right there, where they had an edge. And that's one we found when we did that small dig right near the 5 line. And that rock in there fits right into these grooves, and I think that's how they were smoothing out those grooves and those elliptical grooves. Also, pits or depressions in the working surfaces, as if they might have been using it and then pounding it to break up stuff. And this is one we've seen a couple times, the UPR3, and some serious marks in the bottom of it. So, try to go one more. Oh yeah, this is that UPR6 that had the striations right on this edge especially. You can kind of see them right there. But that's a real sharp edge. You can't see it so well right there. And a nice flat bottom on it. Doesn't show striations real well. So what was processed? It has been assumed that only plant materials were processed with groundstone tools, usually acorn, corn, or nuts. But it's now acknowledged that a wide variety of materials were processed, including plant fibers, animal parts, and minerals. And for this area and these stones, I would like to include the processing of copper and the shaping of sandstone as possibilities. And I'm hoping that I will be able to get these examined through a scanning electron microscope, Bob, at some point in the future, to see if there's residue existing on the faces of these to try to figure out what they were really used for. Oh yeah, this is another one I found up at Delaware Mine. A very flat face with lots of striations, and again, chip marks. And this one and that UPR3, they're just like palm sanders. They fit in your palm, and they're just like clearly made for it. Go ahead. So, to finish, like I started, characteristics. I think these were all beach cobbles. We've all seen beaches along the shore where there's just unlimited amount of rocks, and you go there and you find the right type of rock, the dense, heavy, durable, tough stone, and you got to find the one that's nearly the shape you want it to be, and then you start working with it. They often have at least one tabletop flat side. Some of them are more than one side. Often grooves or striations in the flat side at a similar orientation, almost always longitudinally along the length of it. Battering is evident on one blunted end, and the blunted end has a similar shallow angle. I guess I haven't shown you that much, but I will. And the other end, there's one big battered end, and the other end is often tapered and sometimes sharp. And they have chip marks removed. Go ahead. And this is a number of them lined up just to show you the angle. It's that they're mostly not perpendicular. They've got that little angle to them. And I think that could be from the angle of your elbow, moving just like that. They weren't going straight down, they were just tapping them. That's it. Thank you. Not great yet. Well, actually, we had Scott Hamilton out there last night, but not great. We went to NMU, talked to the archaeology class there. They seemed interested and exciting. That's my goal, is to get a student who's going to do a thesis. There's one young man that's going to be a senior. He's all excited, interested, going to get back to me. Never did. Scott DeMel, I was hoping he'd be here today. He's not here. So we'll go back and talk to the class again this year. Maybe this year's class will have somebody that gets serious about it. But it seems to me one of these students could make a career right here. I have a number of sites. This Upper Planting River site. Some of these other tools were found. I found them on a site on state property that I've talked to the state archaeologist, and all I need is the right people, the right sign, and we can do an investigation there, no problem. And those are both pristine sites. I found a number of other stone tools like in roadbeds. I'll be walking along and there's a rock and it says, "Bob, pick me up." And I pick it up and I say, "Whoa." So that's much more ambiguous where that came from exactly or whatever, but I got three, another site also, but two that are just pristine that I could start a dig right away as soon as I get a professional to do it. If not, I'm going to keep plugging away on the Upper Planting River site, and we'll uncover a little bit more and maybe find something new and exciting, and maybe that'll spark the interest in someone somewhere. Yes? Just a second. I didn't mention that. Planting River. The name comes from, it's now the Pilgrim River. And in the original survey, I'm a land survey technician, the original survey of this area in the 1850s, Douglas Houghton did that township, and he noted the Indian gardens that were at the mouth of what they then called the Planting River. And this is in the upper reaches of it. Yes?
The handstones there, are you picking those up and removing them from the site then?
Yes, I am, because most of them are surface finds. The ones I found on state property were in a four-wheeler trail where they're spinning out. It's on a sandstone outcropping, and they're climbing up over the sandstone, and there's spin marks, and these are laying on the surface. So, and I'm reporting it to the state and telling them what I'm picking up. These other ones are on private property, and we did do a small dig, and we recovered those out of there. And yeah, I took those too. But the rest of them are just surface finds. They're not in context. That's where you get in trouble. If we're disturbing archaeological sites, then we're disturbing knowledge. We're losing valuable knowledge. But if it's a surface find, it's there, then I think it's acceptable and appropriate to pick it up.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, Scott?
What's the licensing process here in Michigan?
I talked to do a dig.
Yeah.
I talked to the state archaeologist. He asked, what's the licensing process? And I understand that it's just a matter of having the qualified individuals sign the paperwork, do a request, and have permission from the landowner, and you're off and running.
So essentially, to run the dig, you've got to have somebody who's holding an archaeological permit issued by the state?
Yes. Well, I assume so.
And that's defined by academic credentials?
Yes. I believe that's right. Anything else? See you in the morning.